And now to this. The Israel Defense Forces is slamming Hamas this morning. They say the group gave them a body that does not match any of the deceased hostages. In an overnight exchange, the group handed over 4 more bodies as part of the U.S.-backed 20-point peace plan that was signed last week. Israeli officials identified those hostages as 35-year-old Riel Baruch, 20-year-old Tamir Nimrudi, and 53-year-old Eitan Levy. Now, their return comes one day after the deadline to return 20 living and 28 dead hostages. Families, they're still waiting for the return of 20 more bodies. One man who is waiting for the release of his father's body calls the delay a violation of the agreement. Listen to what he had to say.
We're expecting everybody, including the Israeli Prime Minister and government, and definitely Donald Trump and the U.S. administration, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, to act swiftly in explaining Hamas this is not acceptable. This is a clear violation of the agreement. We haven't heard anything since yesterday when we learned that that was the last official communication that came to us, and since then we haven't heard anything.
CBS News senior foreign correspondent Debora Patta is in East Jerusalem with the latest.
Hamas is slowly releasing the bodies of hostages still in Gaza, a total of 7 so far, which has angered families waiting for their loved ones. We spoke to hostage negotiator Gershom Baskin, who told us, sadly, some bodies may never be recovered. He said many of the Hamas commanders who buried the Israeli hostages were killed by Israel. And there are also thousands of Gazans who are unaccounted for beneath the rubble of buildings bombed by the Israeli military. The Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics says more than 11,000 people are still missing in Gaza. First responders are searching for the dead, but it is not easy when over 90% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed. And there are only the most rudimentary tools available. As Gaza starts to think of rebuilding, the U.S. peace deal calls for an interim governing body headed by President Trump to run the territory. That ultimately will hand control over to Palestinian rule. But that body has not been established yet, and Hamas has stepped into the vacuum, allegedly targeting Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. Baskin said there are gangs empowered by Israel who were involved in illegal activities before the war, who have been empowered as an alternative to Hamas. President Trump said, and I quote, "That didn't bother me too much, to be honest with you." The Palestinian Authority has condemned the Hamas executions as extrajudicial killings, calling them heinous crimes, and called for the restoration of law in Gaza and a return to legitimate Palestinian rule. Debora Patta, CBS News, East Jerusalem.
Meanwhile, President Trump is sounding off on the next phase of that 20-point peace plan, specifically the part about Hamas disarming. Listen to the warning he gave just yesterday.
How long will it take Hamas to disarm, and can you guarantee that is going to happen?
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
How will you do that?
I don't have to explain that to you. But if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games. If they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro is live outside the White House, and he joins me now. Aaron, thank you for joining us today. Is it possible the president will put U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza if Hamas does not disarm?
Mugo, good to be with you. As you heard the president there say, he didn't necessarily reveal many details on what it would look like in terms of U.S. involvement in disarming Hamas. But so far, there has been no sign of this administration wanting to put U.S. troops' boots on the ground. What we heard from Vice President Vance over the weekend is that they're not planning to do that. We do know that there are 200 U.S. military officials at what is known as a Civil Military Coordination Center in Israel that is meant to provide security and logistical assistance to other countries' troops on the ground. We know that the U.S. is coordinating with other Gulf Arab states who do have troops on the ground in Gaza. And we did get a statement from Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM, which is responsible for U.S. interests in the Middle East and parts of Asia, where he urged Hamas to suspend their shooting of innocent Palestinians in Gaza, as well as parts of the Gaza Strip where there are Israeli military forces. He said, quote, Hamas should adhere to the 20-point plan and disarm without delay. He also said that he conveyed his concerns to mediators. And yesterday, President Trump said he also relayed his messages to Hamas through senior U.S. officials.
And so, Aaron, speaking of that 20-point peace plan, what is the next phase? Because I know there's still some questions as to what phase we're even in right now.
Yeah, at one point on Monday, President Trump said that the phases are a little bit mixed in with each other, signaling that there are still ongoing negotiations and we could see some things change once this hostage part of the deal is fully completed. But President Trump has said repeatedly that disarming Hamas is part of the next phase, which will lead to Israel pulling more troops and withdrawing military forces in the Gaza Strip. He's also talked about the actual rebuilding of Gaza. But in terms of specifics, it's not necessarily a set, step by step, despite what the 20-point plan says. But we do know from this administration, from Vice President Vance's interview with Face the Nation, that President Trump is expected to give and put consistent pressure on both Hamas and Israel to adhere to the plan while working with those other Arab nations in the region.
All right, Aaron Navarro at the White House for us today. Thank you.